Game of Thrones has finally come to a close with the most ambitious television production of all time. It represents the end of an era, the end of a cultural phenomena, but the final culmination of nearly 8 years of storytelling since 2011 all lead up to what most people thought was a pretty big letdown. The two showrunners have had their original affectionate title of D&D stripped and replaced with Dumb and Dumber. Even the cast seems to have been trying their best to downplay their general disappointment with the series and in the public eye.
And are you happy with how things ended? Yes. She didn't say yes. You didn't say yes.
Best season ever!
A little bit Avengers Assemble, and it's a little bit kind of like...
Well, that was totally what season 7 was all about, wasn't it?
Exactly.
Character development?
Lob it all
Story! I really need to shut up.
You're brave.
If you could describe the season finale of Game of Thrones in one word, how would you describe it?
Disappointing.
And generally before, I've argued in D&D's favor, previously saying that they were stuck in a bad situation with a lot of spinning plates, but ultimately it was their job to finish spinning those plates, even if the answers wouldn't be as satisfying as the ones George R.R. Martin might have come up with when he's not trying to play it hip with all those energy-drinking Fortnite-loving millennials. I think, though, now that we've seen the ending of the series, it's safe to say that a lot of the bullet points feel like things George would have done. Building up Dany's arc to become the Mad Queen would be the final brutal reveal that would manage to shock people as much as the Red Wedding, and having Jon Snow kill her seems like the kind of bittersweet finale we've expected from the series. While Bran becoming a sort of living Wikipedia page to guide Westeros, while not satisfying, is an unexpected enough turn to feel plausible as something George R.R. Martin might actually do in the final book of A Dream of Spring. Suffice to say, D&D had decent credits before, and have shown themselves very capable, at the very least, strongly adapting good source material, until their true faces were laid bare when they saw that they had more in line with someone like Zack Snyder, who's very strong at adapting material, but is kind of terrible when he has full creative control over it, and has to come up with stuff on his own.
Oh, like Batman killed a guy. Wake the fuck up. Once you've lost your virginity to this fucking movie, and then you come and say to me something about oh, my superhero wouldn't do that. I'm like, are you serious? Point of view to be like, my heroes are still innocent. Lie to America. My heroes didn't, embezzle money from their my heroes didn't fucking commit any atrocities. I'm like, that's cool. But you're living in a fucking dream world, okay? So...
D&D came to the endpoint that George R.R. Martin had already scribbled on a napkin long ago as the grand finale for his magnum opus, even if he'd spent the past 7 to 8 years torturing himself about how to get there. But despite having the endgame laid out before them, they still took the worst path to get there. But I think this is an interesting challenge, and as an armchair screenwriter, could I do better? Well, let's find out. So I'm going to give you my revised outline for seasons 7 and 8 of Game of Thrones. This isn't going to be a hyper-detailed beat-by-beat breakdown, but rather a broad strokes overview of my suggested revisions for the 2 seasons, so let's see if I can come up with something that you might like better. So the biggest problem is the flow of the series. First it starts off with Daenerys versus Cersei, then everyone minus Cersei versus the Night King for a second, then goes back to the Cersei conflict before introducing the twist that Daenerys is the true final boss of the series. There's a ton of issues with this setup that, as we saw played out, turned out to be pretty unsatisfying in execution. So the big underlying thing in my rewrite outline is I'm switching the order of conflicts around. First we're going to have the Cersei conflict over and dealt with in one blow, then we lead up to the seemingly final boss with the Night King, then cap it off with the true secret final boss of the series with Daenerys. So for this exercise, we're basically starting at the beginning of Season 7, where Daenerys is finally making her way to Westeros via ship. She has her dragons, her unsullied and Dothraki army in tow, ready to take the Iron Throne. Now Cersei is seated atop the Iron Throne, dead set on making sure she can keep it. But sadly for her, she's lost the support of Dorn and Highgarden. It's all looking pretty terrible for her right now, but a new ally comes in her hour of need. Yes, it's Euron Greyjoy again, but with a few tweaks. Now, we're not going to change him that much to the much better version that's seen in the books, because that version is very much dependent on the material that hasn't been written yet. But we are going to make a few adjustments from the book. This version has been to the smoking ruins of Valyria and picked up a few trinkets along the way. I mean, if he is going to be the scruffy, douchey Jack Sparrow with magical teleporting ships and the ability to no-scope headshot a dragon out of the sky, let's put some justification for his magical bullshit. So this version of Euron has several relics he's taken from the smoking ruins of Valyria that gives him the same kind of low-scale magical powers we've seen used by the Red Priests. We can give him all kinds of lo-fi magical powers. But you know what? For now, let's just go with teleportation. He's got a strange orb, he closes his eyes, opens them, and then he's in a new place. This, combined with his extensive experience having sailed around the world, makes him an incredibly dangerous adversary. Daenerys wants to storm King's Landing and claim the capital for herself, but her advisors warn her that it will be difficult to prevent civilian casualties, and if she becomes a tyrant she claims to want to overthrow, then it'll just be Meereen all over again, with her being a foreign invader fighting an insurgency seeking to undermine her. So Tyrion offers to broker a peace conference where they can all meet and try and work out a compromise, or at the very least see if they can get Cersei to surrender peacefully. This culminates in a new version of the Dragon Pit scene where all the major players come together. Jon comes from the north to try and gain support to fight the army of the dead. Daenerys comes with all her dragons and armies to show Cersei how hopelessly she has her outmatched. She threatens her with fire and blood to purge Cersei and her house from the face of the earth, but Cersei just smirks, knowing the ace she has up her sleeve, threatening that before everything is said and done, it'll be Daenerys who's begging for mercy she'll never give. The meeting ends and everyone leaves, but suddenly there is a series of ambushes. Euron is leading several different strike teams of Ironborn and Lannister men who attack the convoys carrying royalty. He successfully assassinates Olenna Tyrell and captures Ellaria Sand and her Sand Snake children to bring them to Cersei. Nobody knows how this is possible. Accounts say it was like he was in 5 places at once. It just doesn't seem to make any sense. Then we go to the Red Keep where Cersei starts to torture Ellaria Sand. She gloats at her, telling her how it was her people, the people of Dorne, that gave her the idea. She'd had Qyburn research into how people had managed to successfully fight against dragons, and the Targaryens of the past. She learned that fighting out in the open was a fool's game. The true path to victory was to not let them determine a place of battle, but to deny them an open fight and kill them by bleeding them out through 1,000 small cuts. This war of attrition begins to take its toll. Daenerys has lost her major allies, and the smaller bannermen have started to flock back to Cersei. The attacks are growing bolder, with suicide bombs of wildfire-strapped peasants burning Dothraki horses and diminishing her number of Unsullied. She still has her dragons, but the more she waits, the more indecisive she seems. The political advice that Tyrion and Varys are giving just isn't working. There is no diplomatic solution, especially against a woman who's never known what it's like to be on the losing side of anything. Daenerys grows tired of trying to negotiate, then brings fire and blood to King's Landing. She invades, taking out the defending forces with ease, but as she gets close, the resistance grows more fanatical. You know that scene in every Iraq war movie, that one scene where you have the US troops coming in and they're getting panicky, trying to do the right thing, but they don't speak the language and things just keep escalating as they have some woman in a hijab yelling in Arabic and US troops yelling back at her until someone pulls out a gun or a suicide bomber runs at them, then everything goes to shit while some Arabic music plays in the background? The Battle of King's Landing is basically like that. Cersei is child soldiers with pots of wildfire strapped to them running into the Unsullied. The Unsullied try to calm things down, but things escalate into violence because they don't speak the common tongue used in Westeros. This all culminates when Daenerys goes to speak to a crowd of civilians who are terrified of her and her dragons. Then suddenly someone in the crowd tries to shoot her with an arrow. Then she just lets loose, burning them all down. Now this doesn't lead to her burning the entire city. But the path to her getting to Cersei isn't clean, and she leaves it with blood on her hands. She doesn't just massacre everyone, but there are a few incidents that don't go so smoothly. This shakes her deeply after winning the city, and she ultimately confronts Cersei in the Red Keep. Cersei is like a cornered animal laughing at her, saying how she calls herself the breaker of chains, but she'll soon understand no matter what she does, that the people will always hate her. That's the nature of rule. If the populace didn't hate those ruling them, then chances are they weren't doing a very good job of ruling. She says ultimately that all she'll have left is the bitter poison cup that will consume her and the kingdom. There is no breaking the wheel, because placing yourself above others turns you into one. Cersei goes out with a bang. She takes the goblet of wildfire, drinks it, and runs at Daenerys, setting herself ablaze in a last-ditch effort to take her out once and for all. But Drogon protects her, using his fire to try and stop Cersei dead in her tracks. It works, but it sets fire to the Red Keep, burning it all down, including setting fire to the Iron Throne. It doesn't entirely melt it, but it does disfigure it into a warped mess resembling the current state of Westeros. Daenerys is now queen, but it is a Pyrrhic victory. Her family's home lies in ruins, the city is devastated, the common folk fear and hate her, and at least Cersei didn't have 3 wild dragons that would eat their livestock and kids at random or burn them if they dared look at it the wrong way. Drogon, Viserion, and Rhaegal are allowed to do whatever they please, and Daenerys does little to try and rein them in, despite pleading from her advisors that they can't be allowed to roam free on the countryside. Daenerys is suspicious. She's gotten everything she wanted, but like the half-melted Iron Throne, it's all turned to ash. The people run away from her on the streets, they pelt the Unsullied with rocks. She's had to keep the Dothraki separate from the civilian population. None of the Great Lords want to see her in person, instead pledging their fealty through letters provided by ravens. This is not the homecoming she wanted, but as she grows more isolated, she resolves to lick her wounds and rebuild. But she can't. The wall is finally under attack. The undead are climbing it, and the Night's Watch, which has been nearly depleted even with wildling reinforcements, cannot keep them at bay. So weary and tired, Dany marches north at the request of Jon Snow. During their march north, there is doubt about how far the future with this new queen can last. She's grown more withdrawn and callous, but then Sam unearths the truth about Jon Snow's true lineage, that there is another Targaryen with a better claim to the throne. Daenerys' reinforcements march to the wall, and she provides support by burning the Whites climbing up it. It looks promising, like she can single-handedly hold off the assault of the dead with her 3 dragons, but in the distance the Night King is watching and smiles. A huge blizzard comes. It's pitch white, 0 visibility, Daenerys is nearly knocked off Drogon, the storm passes and we see Viserion is impaled on the wall itself with a huge icicle through his neck. Daenerys flees, and Viserion rises as an undead steed for the Night King, who uses him to blow a chunk through the wall. What's left of the defenders flee south as the army of the dead march through their newly created path. The Night King marches across the north, slaughtering lesser houses and their castles, burning all of the weirwood trees on his path of destruction. The last line of defense is Winterfell. At this point, all forces have convened at Winterfell. The way they see it, they lost the wall because they weren't prepared, but now they have the best minds and the best army the world has ever seen, with an entire armory filled to the brim with dragonglass from Dragonstone. They can hold back the army of the dead. Jon is worried, though. He's seen how they fight and knows no member of the living is ever truly prepared to face the army of the dead. But Tyrion, working together with Jaime, who despite his sister's death has kept his promise to defend the people, have collaborated to create a strategy to create several fire trenches to hold the undead back, as they shower them with artillery, with the cavalry in reserve, should they somehow manage to break through the firing line. Everyone's confident they can pull through because the living are smarter than the dead, but the army of the dead is finally here and the trenches are lit. Whites try and storm through, but are quickly burnt as they try and run through the trench and become easy prey for the Unsullied, as the trebuchet continues to hurl burning rocks into the larger army. But each hit is like a small drop in a tiny bucket. There's just too many of them. Then everything grows eerily silent as a blizzard comes bursting through. All of the trench fire is dead, and the horde swarms through the Unsullied as they try to cover a retreat, but the trebuchets are demolished. A few fire from inside the courtyard, but it is useless. The Dothraki horses are terrified, reeling away in horror as the cavalry charge is broken. The walls are breached as the tide of the dead pours through the front gate and over the castle walls. The game is over. The battle is lost. All that's left is for what few soldiers remain to try and hold back the tide of the undead, so most of the main characters can make it out alive. So we have a Pyrrhic death of several beloved side characters. As the main cast retreats from the Winterfell, we see the Night King doing something very interesting. He goes towards the weirwood trees in Winterfell, making special effort to ensure that they are burned. As our heroes retreat, they speculate that maybe that's the ultimate goal of the Night King, that since he was created by the children of the forest to eliminate the first men, he's also seeking to kill their gods as well, before turning them all into the army of the dead. Our heroes know they can't win against him in a straight-up fight, but maybe they can create an ambush for him, as they know he's targeting the weirwood trees in the northern groves. And there's an especially thick grove of weirwood trees just south of Winterfell. Everyone lies in ambush, the dragons are there, what troops remain are hidden under snowfall, everyone is ready. The Night King comes and Daenerys hits him with dragonfire, but it does nothing. One of the main reasons why his death was so unsatisfying was because after he gets hit with dragonfire, it's sort of implied that the usual methods we've seen to kill a White Walker won't work on the Night King. The power of fire or Valyrian steel isn't quite enough to really get him down. Despite the sense of the female empowerment that might come with seeing Arya kill the most dangerous monster in all of Westeros, fundamentally her skill set is entirely built around killing regular humans through subterfuge, not slaying the mythical Blue Man Group, not to mention she doesn't really have any meaningful connection to the Night King or any thread of that storyline. The ultimate thing is that it should feel like a combined effort that was attained through the sacrifice of multiple people, something that our characters have earned through the culmination of their journey. The fact that Dragonfire doesn't work on him is a clear signal to the audience that he operates on a different rule set than other whites or even the other White Walkers. Now here's where we can use the Azor Ahai prophecy. Now the show hasn't emphasized Azor Ahai as much as the books, which spent a bit more time laying it out. For those of you who aren't familiar with the story of the legend, here's the basic gist of it. Darkness lay over the world and the hero Azor Ahai was chosen to fight against it. To fight the darkness, Azor Ahai needed to forge a hero's sword. He labored for 30 days and 30 nights until it was done. However, when he went to temper it in water, the sword broke. He was not one to give up so easily, so he started over. The second time, he took 50 days and 50 nights to make the sword, even better than the first. To temper it this time, he captured a lion and drove the sword into its heart. Once more, the steel shattered. The third time, with a heavy heart, he knew beforehand what he must do to finish the blade. He worked for 100 days and nights until it was finished. This time, he called for his wife, Nisa, and asked her to bare her breast. He drove his sword into her living heart, her soul combining with the steel of the sword, creating Lightbringer, the Red Sword of Heroes! So there you have it, a wonderful way to introduce some more tragedy. So instead of just having Arya stick the Night King with a Valyrian steel dagger, which is an anticlimactic as all hell, we need something grander, and forging a new Lightbringer sword would be great, and there's a lot of people you can stab through the heart to try and make it happen. It can be Jaime, completing his redemption arc by literally sacrificing his heart to save the kingdom, which would be a better ending than just having him get hit by rocks. It can be Melisandre, who fully gives herself to the Lord of Light, or why not Tormund Gingerbeard? Not much else to do with him, and it would be a sad end to a fan-favorite character. Or maybe Rhaegal, who's on his last breath after being torn apart by his undead brother Viserion. Kill one, or maybe kill a bunch of characters, then have a new Lightbringer, and maybe Jon and Arya or a few other people use it to take down the Night King, and you have a more fulfilling climax to the apocalyptic threat of the army of the dead. So we're going towards the beginning of Season 8. Cersei and the Night King have finally been dealt with. A few more episodes to go. What's going on? Is it going to be several episodes of epilogue? This is where we get into Mad Queen mode, and we learn that throughout the fighting, Cersei and the Night King, Daenerys has lost everyone close to her. The truth about Jon's lineage has come out, forever dooming their relationship. The only man who truly loved her died defending her. The people of King's Landing keep assassinating her unsullied and Dothraki army. The Dothraki keep pillaging, going into small homesteads, ravaging the land and its people, as is normal for their culture, and she does nothing to stop it. Tensions keep building. Sansa wants the North's independence, but Daenerys refuses to give it, demanding she bend the knee after saving the North. Then this all comes to a head when there is a protest at the Red Keep. The people are furious. They hate the Unsullied, they hate the Dothraki, and most of all, they hate her dragon who flies around unfettered about, feeding on anyone or anything it wants. This is where she snaps, where she decides that if the people will not accept her as the breaker of chains, then she will become the breaker of wills. She burns King's Landing and all the civilians to the ground, fire and blood for all. She decides that she will go to each of the holds of the Seven Kingdoms, get loyalty from each of them in person, and burn anyone who dares oppose her, starting with the North. She knows that there is no army to challenge her and prepares to march. It's here where Jon Snow must decide, watch his family's home burn to the ground or accept the stigma of becoming a Queenslayer. He makes his final choice meeting her in the bedchambers, pretending to rekindle the relationship they once had before he stabs her through the heart, and it's here where we get to the ending George intended. Jon leaves, we cannot go to the Night's Watch because the Night's Watch does not exist anymore, but he goes to join the Wildlings to rebuild and becomes the reluctant king beyond the wall. Sansa gets to rule the North. Arya decides she'll become a wandering adventurer and see the rest of the world because she knows ultimately there is no place for her in the feudal society that exists now. And Bran becomes the king because it is seen that all of the mistakes of the past has led to nothing more than ruin and bloodshed, and maybe someone who is a complete living memory of the past might bring wisdom. He becomes a figurehead who less rules as much as he advises the small council on 1,000 years of historical precedent, and off on a ledge somewhere on a rocky shore, we see Drogon in a cave nesting with 3 dragon eggs under him. That's my pitch on at least how I think the last 2 seasons should have played out a little bit better. I don't agree with all the choices, but I crafted this under the assumption that the ultimate ending we got was the one that George had intended. And it makes sense, it's just that D&D, or Dumb and Dumber as they've become known by fans, made some of the worst, most unsatisfying choices getting there. Back in Season 7, I gave them the benefit of the doubt, but after Season 8, I think they now go into the Zack Snyder school of talented when they're adapting material, but maybe not the best when it comes to coming up with original stuff, at least for Game of Thrones. And a special thank you to the Pixel Hipster for doing the heavy lifting on editing most of this video. We're very close to getting his channel to over 1,000 subs, so go subscribe to his channel. Get him over 1,000 so he can finally apply for monetization. Help out a little guy. This little guy from Australia, make it to the big leagues. Get him up to 1,000 subs. You can do it. We're so close. We've taken him from 150 to over 700. Now let's get him to over 1,000. There's a link to his channel in the description below. There'll also be a pinned comment. But if you want to see what you're getting into, here's a little preview for a video he made on nihilism in entertainment. Check it out, little taster. And then if you want to see the whole video and go sub to his channel, wait for the end screen. There'll be a link to it after.
Nihilism, in my own words, is an extreme form of pessimism. All sense of morality is forgotten, and any religious, social, and political beliefs are, alongside it, considered nothing as well. It's the ultimate form of negativity, since nihilists believe that life has no inherent meaning to it. There is no hope for the world as it is shrouded with empty beliefs, and if humanity continues to pursue these beliefs, it will lead to extinction. It's derived from the Latin root nihil, which literally means nothing. Nothing that which does not exist. It's pretty bleak.
And a special thanks to him. Go sub to his channel. Make it happen. So I hope you enjoyed my rewritten pitch. Let me know in the comments below. Look forward to hearing back from you guys and seeing what you think. And remember, lobsters are tennis, but don't you grab it.